Do you think I'm worth saving? The shaken gunslinger asked the Lakota woman. Eli Carter had always been known across the barren planet of Talon. 7 as a gunslinger. His name echoed in the saloons and around the campfires, a name that carried fear and respect in equal measure. He had earned his reputation the hard way, by being faster than the fastest and sharper than the sharpest. His reputation was built on countless duels, his lightning-fast draw, and the cold look in his eyes that told people they were about to lose. But now, Eli was a broken man. It started after he came into contact with something strange, an alien weapon he had found in a forgotten ruin during one of his travels. It wasn't a weapon anyone had ever seen before, not even the old-timers. A device that hummed with energy. It felt wrong the moment Eli laid his hands on it. The weapon had a strange design, like it was made for a creature with more than 2 hands, but he didn't think much of it until the tremors started. At first, it was small, a slight shake in his fingers, nothing more than a nuisance. But it grew worse. Day by day, the tremors took more of his strength. It was a curse, a price he had to pay for his arrogance. The one thing that had always kept him alive, his quick hands, was slipping away. Eli tried everything. He sought out doctors, healers, anyone who could offer him a cure. But nothing worked. The tremors only worsened. His hands shook violently and he could barely hold a gun anymore. The one thing that had made him a legend was now a burden. The fastest gun in the galaxy was now a man whose hands trembled with every move. Eli's temper flared more than ever. He began drinking more often, stumbling through the streets of Deadwood Crossing, a settlement on Talon, 7 known for its lawless nature and grimy saloons. He lost his job as a bounty hunter and started gambling his way through whatever money he had left. His pride had been broken and he didn't know how to pick up the pieces. One evening, Eli wandered deep into the desert, seeking some peace, a quiet place where no one could remind him of who he used to be. The dry wind cut through his coat as he walked, the harsh light of the twin suns hanging low in the sky. As he trudged across the sand, a figure appeared on the horizon. At first, Eli thought it was a mirage, but as the figure drew closer, he could see that it was real. A woman walking toward him. She was tall, wearing a long coat that billowed in the wind, her face partly hidden by a scarf. She moved with purpose, her steps steady and calm, as though the desert didn't bother her at all. She wasn't like the other people he had seen. She had an air of mystery about her, and something about her seemed to make the desert seem less desolate. When she came closer, Eli could see her eyes, dark, sharp, and knowing. They studied him without fear. "Can I help you, stranger?" she asked. Eli was about to answer, but his hands started shaking again. He clenched them into fists, trying to hide the tremors, his lips twisted into a bitter smile. "I doubt anyone can help me now," he muttered, looking down at the sand. "I've tried it all. Nothing works." The woman, who had been silent until now, tilted her head slightly. She seemed to study him for a moment before speaking again. "Sometimes help comes when you least expect it," she said. Eli looked up at her, his eyes narrowing. "I'm not interested in charity." She smiled, but it wasn't the smile of someone trying to be friendly. It was the kind of smile that suggested she understood something about him that he wasn't ready to face. "You misunderstand me," she said. "I'm not offering charity, I'm offering a choice." "A choice?" Eli repeated, skeptical. He had made plenty of choices in his life, and they hadn't led him anywhere good. But still, something about this woman intrigued him. Maybe it was the way she stood there, unafraid of the desert or him. Or maybe it was the way her eyes seemed to look right through him. "Yes," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You can keep walking down this path, letting your hands shake and your pride crumble until you've got nothing left. Or you can choose to do something different. You can choose to find your way back." Eli felt something stir inside him at her words. He had heard plenty of talk about redemption, but it had always felt like a lie. Redemption was for people who hadn't already lost everything. But this woman, the Lakota woman, seemed to believe in something more than just survival. She believed that people could change, even when they were as broken as he was. "Do you think I can be saved?" he asked, his voice rough with doubt. "I've done too much. Too many people have died because of me." The woman's expression softened. She didn't respond right away, but the silence between them was heavy. It wasn't the silence of judgment, but the silence of understanding. "Do you think I'm worth saving?" Eli asked again, this time the words coming out softer. He had asked that question to countless others in his mind, but never aloud. Now, in the presence of this stranger, the question felt like it was finally worth asking. She didn't answer immediately, but instead she gave him a steady look, as though she were seeing past his rough exterior to something deeper. I think you have the power to save yourself, she finally said. But only if you're willing to try. Eli stared at her, his heart racing. She wasn't offering him a cure. She wasn't offering him an easy way out. But there was something about her calm presence, something about the way she spoke that made him feel like he wasn't entirely lost. I don't know if I can, Eli said quietly. I don't know if I'm even worth saving anymore. The woman took a step closer, her boots making no sound on the sand. She looked at him with eyes that seemed to carry centuries of wisdom, and in those eyes, Eli saw something he hadn't seen in years. Hope. You won't know until you try, she said. You'll never know unless you choose to find out. Ellie's hands were still trembling, but for the first time in what felt like ages, he felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something more. Eli Carter wasn't sure what to make of the Lakota woman. She had appeared out of nowhere, like a ghost on the wind. She didn't look like anyone he'd ever met, not the kind of woman you'd find in a saloon or in the dirt roads of a dusty town. There was something about her, though, something that made him feel like he wasn't alone in the universe, even though that was exactly how he had felt for a long time. The sun had dipped lower on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, as Eli and the woman, whose name he learned was Ayanna, sat by a small campfire. She had built it quickly, using dry twigs and branches that she gathered in silence. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words had weight, like they were chosen carefully. You've been looking for something, she said quietly, poking the fire with a long stick. I can see it in your eyes. Eli didn't answer right away. He stared into the flames, trying to ignore the shakiness in his hands. He didn't like how vulnerable he felt, but there was something about Ayanna that made him want to talk. Maybe it was her calm demeanor, the way she seemed to understand him without asking. I was looking for redemption, Eli said at last, but I don't think I'll ever find it. She just looked at him with those steady eyes, as if waiting for him to say more. And Eli did. He found himself telling her everything, about the alien weapon, the tremors in his hands, and the path that had led him here, to this barren desert planet. I found something, Eli continued, his voice low. An alien weapon. I thought it would make me powerful again, make me whole. But instead, it cursed me. Now, I can't even hold a gun steady.
He paused and clenched his fists. I'm no good to anyone like this.
She simply nodded, as if she had already known. You think that's the end of it? She asked, her voice soft but strong. You think this is how your story ends? Ellie didn't know what to say to that. He had spent so much time believing that the tremors would be the death of him, the final proof that he was nothing more than a broken man. But now, sitting across from Ayanna, he felt an unfamiliar tug at his heart, a faint glimmer of hope.
I don't know, Eli said, his voice unsure.
I was never meant to be a hero. I'm just a gunslinger, a man who takes what he wants with his fists and his guns. But now, I can't even do that. Ayanna tilted her head, watching him closely. Maybe you've been looking in the wrong places, she said. Maybe your redemption isn't in the way you think it is. Eli felt a knot in his stomach. He didn't understand what she meant, but something told him she wasn't talking about finding another weapon or trying to fix what was broken with his hands. She was talking about something deeper. Where do I find it? Eli asked, his voice low. Ayanna stood up, brushing the dirt off her coat. You find it where you least expect it, she said, looking out toward the darkening sky. You find it by helping others, by doing what's right, even when it's hard. You find it by choosing to stand up, even when you feel like you can't. Eli didn't reply right away. He watched her gather her things, preparing to leave. The fire flickered in front of him, casting long shadows across the sand. It was quiet now, too quiet. The wind had stopped, and the world felt still, as if holding its breath. Where are you going? Eli asked. I'm going to help a friend, Ayanna said, tying her bag tighter. There's a place not far from here. I need to get there before nightfall. Eli stood up, feeling a strange impulse to follow her. He had no reason to, no real reason to go anywhere at all, but something inside him told him to move. I'll go with you, Eli said, his voice firm for the first time in days. I'm not the man I used to be, but I can still help. Maybe that's what I need to help someone else. Ayanna looked at him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. You think you're ready? He looked down at his hands, watching them shake again, but this time they weren't shaking with fear. This time it felt like something else, like a beginning. I'm ready, Eli said quietly. The two of them walked through the desert together, the twin suns sinking lower and lower behind them. Eli was still haunted by the tremors, still struggling to control his hands, but the feeling of purpose that Ayanna had given him kept him moving forward. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel completely lost. He didn't know what he was walking toward, but it didn't matter. He was walking beside someone who believed in him, someone who didn't see him as broken. The path they took led them into a narrow canyon, the walls towering above them like silent giants. The air was cooler now, and the sound of their footsteps echoed off the stone. As they walked, Ayanna explained more about the world she came from, about her people. She told him stories of survival and resilience, of a time when her ancestors had lived in harmony with the land before the humans arrived and brought with them machines and war. Eli listened, fascinated by her stories, but a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The quietness in the air, the stillness of the canyon, it felt too peaceful, too empty. He kept his hand close to his sidearm, just in case. They reached the edge of the canyon by evening, where a small settlement lay nestled against the rocks. It was a poor place, filled with battered buildings and worn faces. The people here looked as if they had seen better days, and the air was thick with tension. Eli's instincts kicked in immediately, the familiar feeling of danger settling in his gut. "This is it," Ayanna said. "My friend is here. He needs help." Ellie nodded, his eyes scanning the area. He had no idea what they were walking into, but it didn't matter. For the first time in a long while, he felt something stir inside him, a sense of purpose. It wasn't about his shaking hands or the redemption he thought he needed. It was about doing what was right. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like maybe that was enough. The air was cool and crisp as Eli and Ayanna approached the shimmering canyon, a place known to few and feared by many. The canyon stretched endlessly ahead, its jagged rocks reflecting the last light of the setting twin suns. It was a place where even the bravest men dared not tread, for it was filled with strange forces and ancient secrets. Ayanna had explained that the canyon was once the home of an ancient alien civilization. The ruins were buried deep within the canyon's narrow paths, and there were rumors of treasures hidden beneath the earth, artifacts from a time long past. But it wasn't the treasure that Ayanna sought. It was something much more important. An old crystal, said to possess the power to heal and restore. As they made their way into the canyon, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The narrow paths twisted and turned, each corner hiding something unknown. The walls of the canyon towered high above them, and the shadows grew longer as the day faded. Eli's hands were shaking again, the tremors making it difficult to grip the small gun he kept at his side. It was a useless comfort, but it was all he had left. "Stay close," Ayanna said, her voice steady as she led the way deeper into the canyon. "The ruins are close, but so are the dangers." Eli nodded, keeping pace with her. He could feel the weight of her words, but he also knew there was something else pulling him forward, something deeper than fear or doubt. He had to find this artifact, for her, for himself, for the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to fix what had been broken. They walked in silence, the crunch of their boots the only sound in the still air. As they passed through a narrow passage, the ground beneath them began to shake, a low rumble echoing through the canyon. Eli instinctively reached for his gun, but Ayanna stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Stay calm," she whispered. "It's not what you think." Before Eli could respond, the ground split open in front of them, revealing a hidden entrance to the ruins. A strange, glowing blue light spilled out, casting an eerie glow on the walls of the canyon. The energy that surrounded the entrance hummed, like a living thing, and Eli could feel its pull in his bones. "This is it," Ayanna said, her voice filled with awe. "We found it." Eli hesitated, feeling a deep sense of unease. The tremors in his hands were worse now, his fingers twitching uncontrollably. But Ayanna was already moving toward the entrance, her determination clear in her steps. With a deep breath, Eli followed her, stepping into the glow of the ruins. The air inside was thick with the scent of dust and decay. The walls were lined with ancient alien symbols, their meanings lost to time. The floor was uneven, covered with remnants of long-forgotten technology. The ruins were more than just a place of history. They were a warning. Ayanna led the way through the labyrinthine corridors, her footsteps confident as she moved from room to room. Eli stayed close behind, his mind racing with questions. What was it about this crystal that could heal him? Could it really fix his trembling hands? Or was it another trap, another empty promise of salvation? They reached a large chamber, the walls of which were lined with strange glowing crystals. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and atop it lay the crystal Ayanna had been searching for. It glowed with a soft, pulsating light, casting strange shadows on the walls. It was beautiful, but also terrifying. Eli could feel its power in the air, like static electricity before a storm. Ayanna approached the pedestal slowly, her hand outstretched. But as she got closer, the ground beneath them began to rumble again. Eli's heart raced as he instinctively reached for his gun, his hands shaking uncontrollably. A loud crash echoed through the chamber, and Eli turned just in time to see a group of men, mercenaries, rushing into the room. They were armed with high-tech weapons, their faces obscured by helmets. "Stay back!" one of them shouted, aiming a weapon directly at Ayanna. Ellie's instincts kicked in. Despite his shaking hands, he drew his gun faster than he thought possible. The tremors seemed to fade for a moment as he steadied the weapon. He fired, hitting one of the mercenaries square in the chest. The man fell to the ground, his weapon skidding across the floor. The other mercenaries opened fire, their weapons cracking in the confined space of the chamber. Ayanna ducked behind a large stone pillar, but Eli stood his ground. His hands trembled, but he forced himself to aim, to focus. He fired again, hitting another mercenary in the shoulder.
The man stumbled backward but kept firing.
Ayanna's voice broke through the chaos. "We have to get to the crystal," she shouted. "It's our only chance." Eli didn't hesitate. He moved toward her, dodging the mercenaries' shots. The room was filled with the sounds of gunfire and shouting, but Eli's mind was focused. He couldn't afford to let them take the crystal, not now. Not when it was their only hope. He reached Ayanna's side, and together they made a dash for the pedestal. As they neared it, the last mercenary lunged at them, trying to grab the crystal. Eli shoved him aside, his gun still shaking in his hand. With one swift motion, he grabbed a crystal and held it in front of him. The moment his fingers touched the glowing surface, a burst of energy erupted from the crystal. It shot through his body, and for the first time in weeks, Eli felt something different. The tremors in his hands began to subside. The shaking that had plagued him for so long slowly faded away, until his hands were steady once more. Eli gasped, his heart pounding in his chest. It was working. The crystal was healing him. Ayanna looked at him, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's real," she whispered. "It's really happening." But before they could fully comprehend what had just happened, the remaining mercenaries charged forward. Eli's hands were steady now, and his mind was clear. He fired once more, taking down the last mercenary with a single shot. With the danger gone, Ayanna stepped forward and took the crystal from his hand. "We've done it," she said, her voice filled with relief. "You've done it. You've done it." For the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't in years. Hope. The crystal had not only healed him physically, but had also given him a chance to redeem himself. As they made their way out of the ruins, the canyon felt less threatening. The weight of the past still lingered in Eli's mind, but it no longer felt like an anchor holding him down. For the first time in a long while, he believed he could change. The sun had just begun to rise over the shimmering canyon as Eli and Ayanna made their way back through the narrow paths. The ruins were now behind them, and the glow of the mysterious crystal still pulsed softly in Ayanna's hands. Eli could feel the change in himself, the steady calm that had returned to his hands, and the weight that had been lifted from his heart. He had expected the healing to be more like a magic trick, a simple fix that would make everything right again. But it hadn't been like that. Instead, the crystal had given him something far more important. A choice. It had healed him, yes, but it had also forced him to confront the man he had been and the man he wanted to become. As they walked through the canyon, Eli glanced at Ayanna, who walked beside him, her eyes steady and focused. She had been the one to bring him here, to guide him through the ruins and show him the path to redemption. But even now, with the tremors gone, Eli couldn't help but feel the weight of his past actions, the things he had done, and the lives he had taken. "I never thought I'd get here," Eli said quietly, breaking the silence. "I thought I was too far gone, that nothing could change." Ayanna glanced at him, her expression soft but serious. "Everyone has a choice, Eli. You just have to choose to take it." Ellie wasn't sure what to say to that. He had spent so much time running from his past, hiding behind his gun and his reputation, that he hadn't stopped to think about what it all meant. Now, with the healing crystal in his possession, it felt like everything had shifted. The tremors were gone, but so was the old version of himself, the man who had once believed he had nothing to lose. As they approached the base of the canyon, they could see the settlement of Talon 7 in the distance, a small collection of weathered buildings. The place was a mix of settlers, scavengers, and traders, and while it was no paradise, it was home to many who had nowhere else to go. Eli's eyes narrowed as he saw a group of men gathered outside a rundown saloon. They were rough-looking, their faces hardened by time and trouble. Some of them glanced over at Eli and Ayanna as they approached, But they didn't make any move to greet them. Eli's hand instinctively reached for his holster, his fingers twitching, but the tremors no longer controlled him. His hands were steady, and for the first time in a long while, he felt in control. Ayanna stopped just a few steps ahead of him, turning to face him. "This is where our paths part," she said, her voice steady. Eli looked at her in confusion. "What do you mean? We made it this far together. I thought we were in this together." Ayanna smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "You've already done the hardest part. You've healed. Now you need to make your choice. You've been running from your past for too long, Eli. But now you have the power to decide who you want to be." Eli felt a tightness in his chest. The choice was before him, and it was his alone to make. For years, he had let his past define him. He had let the tremors in his hands become the excuse he used to avoid facing the truth. But now, with his hand steady and the crystal in Ayanna's possession, he realized that it wasn't just about fixing himself. It was about choosing to be someone different, someone better. "How do I make that choice?" Eli asked, his voice rough with uncertainty. Ayanna's eyes softened. "You've already started, Eli. The fact that you're standing here, that you've come this far, means you're ready. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to be the man you were." Eli stood in silence for a moment, looking at Ayanna, his mind racing. She was right. He didn't have to be the man who had run from town to town, never stopping to face the consequences of his actions. He didn't have to be the man who had used his gun to solve every problem. He had the chance to choose a different path, a path where he could do something meaningful, something good. "Thank you," Eli said quietly, "for showing me the way." Ayanna nodded. "It's not me you should thank, Eli. It's yourself. You're the one who made the choice." With that, Ayanna turned and began walking toward the settlement, the crystal still glowing softly in her hand. Eli watched her for a moment, then took a deep breath. It was time. Time to make his choice. Time to face the man he had been and decide who he wanted to be moving forward. As he walked toward the saloon, Eli's mind wandered back to the lessons he had learned from Ayanna, about redemption, about second chances, and about the power of choice. He had the chance to make things right, to help others instead of hurting them. He had the chance to be something more than just a gunslinger. The men outside the saloon watched him as he approached, their eyes sizing him up. Eli didn't flinch. His hands were steady, his mind clear. He had nothing to prove to them. He wasn't the man he had been. He wasn't the man who had fired first without thinking. He wasn't the man who let his fear guide his actions. One of the men stepped forward, a tall, burly figure with a scar running across his face. "Well, well, look who's back in town," the man said, his voice rough. "I heard you were dead, Carter. Guess you're not as easy to kill as we thought." Eli stopped in front of the man, his eyes steady. "I'm not the man you remember," he said quietly. "And I don't want any trouble." "You don't want trouble? Then why are you back here?" Eli stood tall, his shoulders square. "I came to make a choice. I'm done running. And I'm done being the man I used to be." The man's laughter faded, replaced by a cold silence. The other men shifted uneasily, sensing the change in Eli. He wasn't the same man they had once feared. He wasn't the same man who had earned his reputation by drawing his gun faster than anyone else. Eli's hand remained by his side, his fingers relaxed. The tremors were gone, but more than that, he had found something far more valuable: peace. The peace that came with knowing he had a choice, that he could stand up for what was right, even if it meant facing the consequences of his past. The scarred man looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Well, Carter, you've got guts. I'll give you that. I guess we'll see what kind of man you're going to be." Eli didn't reply. He simply turned and walked away, the men watching him in silence. As he walked, he realized that his journey wasn't over. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was finally walking towards something worth fighting for.